born in Victoria. He's a husband and a father, and he and his wife Ellie have two grown sons. He and his siblings were raised in Saanich by his mother, and after his father passed away when he was very young. He grew up playing sports and was a natural leader at school, on the basketball court, and the lacrosse box. He worked multiple jobs to save cash to attend university, and as a young man, he worked in the BC Mill in a joinery. He earned his bachelor's and master's degree at Trent University in Ontario and Sydney University in Australia. In 2001, he started a management and research consulting company helping both private and public sector organizations. Just like me, he is a cancer survivor. He is a passionate advocate of healthcare, public schools, and community services for families. A very, very accomplished man, and I'd like to say a very good friend. My very special guest today is the Premier of the province of British Columbia, the Honorable John Horgan.
Good to see you, Peter. Thanks for having me on.
You're welcome. You're welcome. I know it's been a busy day, and we'll get right to it. One of the first questions I wanted to ask you is, how did you meet your wife, Ellie?
Well, it is an interesting story, and I guess I can tell it in some comfort. I've told many people this over the years. I went to university in Ontario in my undergraduate degree, and on the first day on campus, there was a pub crawl for all of the new students. And so my wife tells the story that she met me on the first day, and I regrettably have to say that I met her on the second day, because I don't recall the evening before, I'm ashamed to admit, but I met her on the campus the second day, and we've been together ever since. It's been over 40 years now since we first met, and we've been married for 37.
Wow, terrific, terrific. So as a busy life that you have, do you have some hobbies? And if you do, what are they? Because I see you have a lacrosse stick in the back behind you.
Well, I have a basketball hoop at the bottom of my driveway. I throw the ball against the wall here in the office when I'm relaxing. In my backyard at home in Langford, there is a protected area, and I've hung a few coffee cans from the arbutus trees, and I play Frisbee golf, which is now my new passion. I gave up real golf some years ago. I kept getting worse. I never got any better, and that just seemed to me to be too much frustration, packing around a bag full of metal only to go into the bush looking for a tiny ball. So I developed what we call Horgan Hills, which is just, as I say, coffee cans hanging from trees in the backyard. And I like to walk up in the wilderness near my home and throw a piece of plastic around, clanging it off the coffee cans. During the pandemic, I found myself doing jigsaw puzzles, which for a colorblind guy is quite difficult. But this is, again, something that my wife and I collaborate on. She sees the colors, I see the shapes, and we plow through puzzles, or we have been over the past year.
Well, as the Premier and the pandemic and all that takes up your time, how do you keep such a well-balanced life? Or would you say your life is out of balance?
Well, it's a challenge. It is a challenge, and I would have to say that I'm as disoriented as other British Columbians by the events of the past year. I haven't seen my son. One of my sons lives 25 minutes away from my home in Souk. We see him infrequently because of various restrictions. My other son, my oldest son, lives in London, England, so we've not seen him very much. He did come home last summer and was quarantined in our basement, which was a delight for my wife. She stood at the top of the stairs, and she left his dinner halfway down, and he came up to pick it up. So we tried to follow the orders as tightly as we could. But I find balance. I live near the Galloping Goose Trail in Victoria, so I'm on my bike quite frequently, riding out to Machosen and Souk in my community, and I find great relief there. See the odd bear ambling down the trail, talking to people, and that's how I try and ground myself and be in touch with the people in my community.
Now, as a leader, a different leader than I am, obviously, how do you deal with mistakes and errors that you make? I know I've got a system that I've screwed up here, and I've got to correct it. What do you do? How do you do that?
Well, I think what I've, throughout my life, my mom's always made it clear when she was, of course, she's passed away now, but she was a profound influence in my life. My father died when I was a baby, and so I I got most of my good sense from her, and she always made sure that I fessed up to my mistakes and never ran away from errors, but acknowledged them, embraced them, and then grow from there. She also taught me that you're an amalgam of all of the people you meet across the road in your lifetime, the good and the bad. And you shouldn't discount what you learn from the people that have had a negative impact on you, because you learn better how to deal with people in a more positive way. So I've always tried to find that balance.
Battle.
Mistakes in the future, but the public, regular folks, go, okay, you botched that, fair enough, but don't do it again, or learn from it. And that's how I go forward. Is you don't want to dwell on things, but you do have to acknowledge them. And I know you'd agree, Peter, that the only way to resolve an issue that is not going well is to embrace it and turn it in the right direction. And that requires an acknowledgement that you made an error.
So what's your definition of leadership?
Well, for me, again, growing up playing team sports, I was always in a position where I wanted to bring as many people together as possible. That's been how I've lived my life, and how I've adapted to politics. Is currently I have a very strong cabinet with very effective and capable people. And my approach to leadership is to allow them to do their jobs, give them a task, and set them on their way. And through the pandemic, unlike other premiers across the country, I clearly acknowledged that Dr. Henry had far more expertise in dealing with epidemiology and pandemics than I ever would. And rather than trying to translate what she was saying for the public, it made more sense to have her speak directly to them. And that has been effective to this point in time. And that's how I operate in other areas as well, whether it's social development, forest policy, you name it. We assign people to these tasks. And my approach is I'm to bring them all together as a chair of the board rather than a CEO of each component part of government. And that seems to be working so far, and I hope that it will continue working in the future.
Ballpark, how many people would that encompass?
Well, there's 24 cabinet ministers and the accompanying deputies, and then the assistant deputies from there. And so I try to be on top of as many of these issues as I can. I'm curious by nature. I can never get enough information, but I also know that perfection is the enemy of progress. And getting to a place where the greatest number of people can benefit is the best way to develop public policy. I started in my work in government as a policy analyst. Actually, I started opening the mail on Parliament Hill way back in the 1980s, and worked my way from the mailroom into the Premier's office. And I've tried to learn from, we're not talking politics, but I've learned from liberals, conservatives, Greens, New Democrats, trying to adopt the best approaches to getting good outcomes for people, regardless of where they come from. Again, another thing my mom taught me is that good ideas come from everywhere, not just one place. And you should always open your mind to what people have to say. And that's also how you've lived your life, Peter. And I think most successful people get to that place in their life because they've learned and acknowledged that there are others around them that have more expertise. And you try to embrace as much of that as you can to get a positive outcome for yourself, your family, and your community.
What do you think the future holds for John Horgan?
Well, I'm hopeful that it holds an end of the pandemic and a safe and effective summer for the rest of British Columbia. Mm-hmm. This has been an extraordinary time, unlike any other. I certainly didn't plan for this. There was no handbook when I arrived. There wasn't in the top drawer pandemic in case of pandemic break glass or anything like that. But I've looked at best practices and tried to do what I can. The future is always uncertain, and I, as a cancer survivor, you'll know this full well. I've tried, even though it's now a dozen years since my first diagnosis, I've tried to live in the present every day, because this could be your last. And that, I think, one of the benefits of having a diagnosis, as you know, is that it really, it reminds you of your mortality, and it focuses you on addressing in a positive way everything in front of you. Don't have any regrets when you put your head down at night, and get up every morning with a resolve that this could be your last day. And I have to say, leading a minority government very much was like that every day as well. You never knew whether this was going to be your last day in government. It was very much like I had lived my life. So I was quite comfortable during that period. I continue to focus every day on what can I do to make life better for the people around me, and I'll do that until I draw my last breath. That's my hope.
So tell me, who has influenced you the most in your career?
Well, I have to say, I don't know, you would remember Bruce Hutchison, great writer for the Vancouver Sun. He was a neighbor of mine when I was growing up, and he found me in one of his apple trees in his orchard when I was about 9 years old, stealing apples. And he came out of his house and I thought I was in deep trouble. I was scrambling to get out of the tree. And he came to me with a paper bag and said, "Take what you need, but for goodness sakes, use the ladder, don't climb the tree." And from that point on, I became friends with his grandchildren. And therefore, Gramps, as we called him, Bruce, became a mentor for me, and he helped me get through university. He gave me my first job splitting wood with my undergrad degree. And I have to say, I would go to his camp, he called it, as his place at Shawnigan Lake here on Vancouver Island. And he would take me to the wood pile, and he wrote many columns about the importance of a wood pile when you're living in a camp. And so he told me the importance of how to cut the wood, where to pile the wood. And I would swing the axe for 10 or 15 minutes. And then he would say I was working too hard. I needed to come in the house. And we spend the rest of the day talking about cabbages and kings, about politics. He knew Mackenzie King, you know, he knew Robert Borden. And as a student of history, it was such a delight to sit down with a living history book. And so Bruce Hutchison had a profound impact on me. I wanted to be a journalist. He wrote me a 2-page letter. I've shown it to Vaughn Palmer when I was trying to get into Carleton University for the 1-year journalism program. It was a glowing recommendation, but they turned me down. So I never went into journalism, but I was motivated by storytelling. And that was what Bruce instilled in me. And as an Irish descendant, of course, there's nothing we Irish like more than telling stories and hearing stories. So part of my approach to engaging with people is to find a way to tell the story of whatever the issue might be. And I learned that from Bruce Hutchison.
Good man. Tell me, what makes you happy? What makes you the happiest?
A good day's work and a positive result. Whether it's working in the garden, whether it's working on a difficult issue in government, whether it's in a sport or a game. I do like to win. I'm very competitive. But I do like the process of the game as much as winning. I've never been one who would win at all costs, but obviously what makes me happy is success, not just for myself, but for those around me. And that's what motivated me to get involved in elected politics in the first place. Is I never really saw myself doing this, quite frankly, Peter, but Adrian Dix has been a friend of mine. We met years ago, both British Columbians in exile in Ottawa. We characterized ourselves on Parliament Hill. And he convinced me to run for office. I had never really thought about that. I liked public policy. I liked complex issues and trying to find solutions. And he convinced me that the best way to do that was to be part of a government. And I spent 12 miserable years in opposition before I got the opportunity to return to government. And I'm forever grateful for that. But what excites me is positive outcomes, whether it's in business, in politics, in life. Everybody wants to succeed, and it inevitably takes hard work, but it also takes cooperation and collaboration with those around you. And that's, again, going back to my mom, never burn a bridge. You never know when you're going to need to walk across it. Always be kind and generous. And we were big on fairness in our household. Everybody does or nobody does. And that is kind of how I've lived my life as well.
So tell me, what do you think your legacy will be?
I don't really think in those terms.
Okay.
I don't think in those terms really. I think I know my legacy is 2 young men who I'm very proud of as my sons, and being able to walk in my neighborhood and my community, knowing that I'm doing the best I can to help those around me. I believe that that's what my mom instilled in me. What better endeavor in life's work than to do your best to help others? And that's I hope will be how people would remember me. I did my best to help those around me.
Would you say that could be your guiding principle to life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's always been, again, we were challenged when I was a child. I have two, well, one brother's now passed away, but my siblings were much older than me. I was an afterthought, the last of four children, and my father died when I was a child. And so I was raised by my sister and my brothers and my mom, and all of us had to hang together. She had no marketable skills. She had been in the Air Force as a communications person at Pat Bay here in Victoria, but she had been a homemaker until my father passed, and she had to find work, and there were struggles in my early days. And so again, we learned to do the best we could with what we had. That shaped how I looked at abundance, and shaped how I looked at scarcity as well. And so when I look at around the world at 7 billion souls on the planet, all trying to lift themselves up, I see the challenges that has on our environment and ultimately on our economy. And so all of those things, it started at an early age, and here I am now in my early 60s, looking at how can we best manage the struggles of people around us. And that was taught to me by observing my brothers, my mom, and my sister when I was a child.
Tell us something about you that would surprise us.
Grade 1 on Valentine's Day, I was elected King of Hearts. And the Queen of Hearts was Laurie Hallier, who went on to be an actor. She and I were together from kindergarten right through to grade 12. And for me, the greatest role she ever played was a Borg on Star Trek Voyager. I'm a big Star Trek fan, Peter. And so to have my first girlfriend from kindergarten go on to be even though it was only a one episode shot at Star Trek, I figure that's the pinnacle for me. It doesn't get any better than that.
With the demands on your time, and I'm so grateful that you set this 25 minutes for me. How do you keep your energy and enthusiasm so positive?
I wish I knew. A lot of people say that why are you so relentlessly optimistic? But as you know, the prospect when your doctor says you have cancer, that changes your perspective, because the C word is got all of this negative connotations about it. And of course, many people lose their lives as a result. So you and I, knock on wood, so far so good. But that is just, I feel that I'm fortunate every day to be here. And I try and not lose sight of that. There are days when I get frustrated and I get down, and I have to kind of, slap myself and say, wait a minute, man, you could be dead, and you're not. Mm-hmm. So, and that's another thing my mom used to say. It's an expression, maybe some of your readers would remember, you're a long time dead. Like when I would say, I don't want to do that, she said, well, you're a long time dead. You can do nothing then. Right now, you should do something. And so that's another one of those expressions that she instilled in me, and I've carried with me throughout my life.
Has there been a favorite book that has influenced you the most over the years?
Great Expectations. I love Dickens. My wife turned me on to Dickens when we were undergrads. And I love the way he writes. I'm a historian, so, Victorian England interests me from a historical perspective, and his writing is just so spectacular. And my favorite book is Great Expectations.
Okay, I have one last question. And take your time if you need to, because it's an unusual question. The question is simple. What is your prayer?
Well, that's a simple question. It was on the wall at our house. My father was born in County Cork in Ireland. I am an Irish citizen as a result of that, and it's an Irish prayer. You've probably heard it. May the road rise up to meet you. May the wind always be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and the rain fall softly on your fields. And when we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. And that was the prayer on the wall in our house. My father was a Catholic. My mom was Church of England. I raised my kids in the United Church as a compromise to all of that. And those are the words that guided me as a youth and guide me to this day. I wish the best for everyone. Cool breezes, warm sun, and prosperity going forward.
Well, that's the best you could do, my friend. That's the best you could do. John, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your honesty and frankness. And this has been a terrific interview. I appreciate it very, very much. Is there anything you think I can do or a company can do to help you? Happy to do so.
I really appreciate it, Peter. All the best to you.
Thank you, John. God
Bye
bless.
now.